Welcome to Tree Doctors. We're starting out in Marion today, and I'm going to catch up with Ed Dickey first, and he's going to give you an idea of what he does to save your trees. Then we'll be out in the field and all over. Tree Doctors begins right now.
You know, great strides have been made in the chemical community as the technology come available now where you don't need to clumber some capsules to tree, and we can put actually 9 or 10 different products at one time in a tree. You can see it boiling out from around the base of that as I'm injecting this into the soil ball. Amino acids, different miticides, insecticides. We can choose what we want to treat for, and we get a long residual from this. So you get a year's worth of good or longer out of our injection when we do a tree. An actual moat of chemicals put around your tree, and it's all moisture activated. So as the weather hits it or the rain, it supercharges it again and carries through the tree. So to get rid of your unwanted insects or to revive a tree to put new life in it, you know, that's what we do. We put the zap back in the sap. We give new life to old trees. That's what we do. We're the Tree Doctors. Dickey Tree Service in your yellow pages under trees.
It's time to catch up with the head tree doctor at Dickey Tree Service, Ed Dickey, and see what's going on with your trees on Tree Doctors.
I want to talk a little bit about these sucker branches, what referred to as water sprouts. And they come from where they've been cut off before, and they resprout themselves on the trunk. And if you wasn't cut off properly to start with, they're going to come back again. You can see where they left some there. I'm clipping these back for the people and show you how it looks after you cut them. But the proper way to do this is to cut these all the way back so you don't leave these little sprouts, and then they won't sprout as easily, and it's easier to might have a well kept look. But you can see it's doing it all up through here, so it's going to be a constant worry to keep these broken off, or else you're going to have low limbs where you don't want them. But that's what you call water sprouts or sucker growth. But if you cut that back close to the tree, leave about 1/4 of an inch, they won't sprout out as readily. That's how you control your water sprouts. We're here in Jonesboro, and I'm here with Rebecca Ryan, and it's been a little over a year, Rebecca. You remember what was going on with your trees when you called me?
Yes, sir. We were having trouble with borers. I noticed sap coming out from the tree trunk and holes going all the way around, and so I figured I wanted to get them treated before they started dying because, you know, we put quite a bit of initial investment in the trees. So I wanted to check and see exactly what was going on. I suspected borers, but then I called you, and you were able to come out and confirm my thoughts.
Yes, ma'am. And what I did, Rebecca had me treat 4 here, and could you notice a big difference after we got them treated, Rebecca?
Well, I noticed there weren't any more holes showing up and no more sap. And they've been healthy ever since, and I'm looking at good results.
Well, thank you. And you got a very pretty yard here. And I'd give Rebecca some tips, her and her husband, when I was here before, and we're going to move over to a spot where they took my advice.
Yes, sir, we did.
A lot of times when I look at a tree, the tree would be weak and have 2 or 3 lateral branches or that could separate or could bust, and I recommend that they bolt them back together, put a bracing rod in them, and you've seen me do that several times on the show. And it's something a homeowner can do themselves if they want to, a lot of times, and I want to show you the different ways you can do it. Here is this is where I put an extension on a drill bit, and some of mine are 8 and 9 foot long, but this one here has been brazed to make it attached. Now that works too. You can get it brazed. It's a simple 1/2 inch rod that's brazed to the end of a drill bit. Now the trick of this when you're drilling your hole is when this flute, that's the curled area, gets full, you have to pull that out periodically because if you get that all stopped up in there, it's going to twist off or have a tendency to try to twist off where it's fixed. So if you just stick it in till it's full and pull it out, you can kind of feel by the turn of the drill when it's full. Another way, in a quite simpler way, this is a little bit larger bit for if you got a bigger tree, is this welded. And you can actually pile the weld on where you weld the half-inch bit to the drill, because this is just so long as it's smaller than the size of the diameter that's going in the tree. And there again, once that flute gets full, you pull it back out. And you can drill, we drilled 8 foot through trees that very way. And you've seen some of them on the show that we did that. But a homeowner can do that, but the reason why I wanted to mention that, a lot of homeowners say they don't have a drill big enough. And well, if you do just a little bit of customizing, you'll have a drill bit big enough. So maybe that'll help you if you got a tree out there and you can't afford to get us to fix it, that you can fix it yourself, and you can do it properly. You can get a zinc plated rod, which is nothing but an all thread. You can get a half-inch or 3/4 or 1 inch. We use a lot of 1 inch ourselves. So pull these trees back together and save a few trees. You'll be glad you did. I had mentioned to Rebecca that she ought to think about putting a bracing rod in this, and it's something that they could do, and you and your husband took that to heart, and here we have the results, isn't it?
Well, I told my husband what you had suggested because we didn't want the tree splitting in case of a strong wind or a storm, and he said, well, I think I can do that. And we just took a extra long drill and drilled a hole right through both sides of the tree, and then went in it with a, I think you told us, 3/4 inch rod with a bolt on the end, and stabled it together.
Yes, ma'am, and what had happened here, this is a weak crotch down here, and if it's right amount of ice or wind could cause it to separate, and it's a key tree close to their main driveway, and this zinc-plated rod that they had put in here, and it's easy to see how this would help this. And a lot of times you don't have to go this high, you can go low like this, but here I recommend it here to give it more holding ability. And you did another one or two in the yard this way, didn't you?
Yes, we went ahead and did a few others that we saw that could potentially have the same problem, and they're older trees, and they've been here for a good while, and we just wanted to save them and keep them. Have a long-term investment in them.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I'm tickled to see people take my advice, and it really wasn't, once you did the first one, it wasn't that much trouble, was it?
No, it just took kind of figuring out a little bit how to get it lined up, and after that, there wasn't a problem.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I appreciate you, Rebecca, talking about your trees, and we might stop by here and sometime after a storm or something, see how these hold up.
I hope they're still there. I feel like they will be.
I do too. Thank you. What I'm doing here is I'm soil injecting this tree with about 9 different products. The main reason is you can see this soil that they dumped on the ground behind me, left piled up here for a long time before this house starts to be constructed. That killed out the roots that was underneath this soil. Now when they move that, that's not going to reactivate those roots. Those roots die because for lack of oxygen, they die. What I'm doing here is to compensate for the damage done there from the new construction, whether it be a ditch being dug or like they did here, cover 1/3 of the growing area of this tree. Once they move that, this is a moisture activated compound that I put down. It will cause new feeder roots to take on off and help this tree recover. Just like if it was a lightning struck tree, it would do the same thing. Same process. And as I move from one injection site to another, you can see the chemical coming out behind me in the hole right behind where I just put it in. Once that's filled, I move over another 5 or 6 inches. Do it again. This process is done all around the trunk of the tree, and an actual most of the chemical is put down. That way, when moisture from rain, or if you put a water hose out here, activates the chemical, the feeder roots start to grow. It's also got chemicals in it to take care of your board, any insect activity, as well as any mites. So we do this a whole lot when the construction damage is done or insect damage has pulled a tree down. So this soil injection, it's the top of the line, and the chemicals we use, they're the top of the line. So that's what I'm doing on this tree. I'm here in Rector with George Jernigan and his mother, Mrs. Jernigan. This is the largest oak on your property, isn't it, Miss Jernigan?
I think it is. Real proud of this tree.
Well, it's actually 2 trees, isn't it? 2 different kinds.
Yes.
That's what I'm told.
You know what kind they are. I don't know. There's so many different kinds of oak.
Yes, this is a red oak on this far side, and this other tree, it's a buck oak, I think, is growing, kind of pushing its way out, and y'all just left it there through the years and
It was that way when we got here.
and just left it that way, and they're coexisting fine. And up at the top, the shade looks balanced without looking down here knowing they're two separate trees.
Two separate trees.
It's deceiving.
Also beside us here is a compost thing. You do a lot of composting here, or have over the years?
Everything that will rot goes in here. Everything that'll go back to the soil. Old shredded paper, leaves, grass clippings, anything that you can find that will.
A lot of people forget that we can take our newspapers, and even if you don't have a shredder, lay it down and wet them, wad them up or tear them up or whatever, and mix it in with your table scraps and all of that. And
Got another place for table scraps up there under.
Well, I've been putting some in here too,
Well,
Mother.
that helps to
But
speed this up.
This is a fairly new
No,
pile
this
here.
was just started a month or so
I
ago.
notice you have eggshells and everything.
Right.
Well, my peelings from the kitchen sink, I have a bucket sitting there by the sink, and anytime we peel a potato or a tomato, it goes in that bucket, along with coffee grounds, everything that's going to deteriorate eventually. We put it in here and try to hurry it up.
Right. Well, over at my house, there'd be a lot of watermelon hulls in there, rinds.
There's some in here right
You
now,
don't have
too.
a horse.
Don't have no horse.
Oh, the horses love watermelon rind.
Oh, do they?
Oh boy, do they ever.
Well, maybe pass that on to some people. They can pass that on to and get some watermelon for their horses. What about cantaloupe rinds?
Well, anything like that.
I'm talking about for the horses.
Oh, the horses. I'm not interested in the horse food.
Yes, ma'am. But a lot of people need to go back to what here, because you must tell them how much actual money over a year that it saves a person once they get into that, and it's really no trouble, is it?
Improves the soil that's here, makes it loose.
Yes, ma'am. It aerates the ground, and that organic matter makes it a looser, fluffier soil that'll grow, well, like your yard. You're growing almost everything.
Just about.
Yes, ma'am. You sure are.
Except for the deer.
Well, it makes the other critters, the squirrels and the deers,
They
come
like to come here.
because it's a great yard. Now the compost over to my right here, you just
That's just raked up leaves there.
But that's been going since last fall, and it's ready. We're going to dress our garden this fall with it and use it to amend the soil. It's really rich.
You want to turn it and stir it occasionally.
you ever wet it down with water?
Yes, we have. If we don't have enough rain, we'll come down here and water it.
Yes, ma'am. So just a little attention, and it does all the rest, doesn't it?
That's all the rest.
And I've been in folks' yards in the past, and this be full in just a few weeks. It's down to.
That's right. It's working.
It works it right down.
And it's warm in there.
Yeah, it creates its own heat inside there, and that's what makes it work.
Mm-hmm. I had a friend in Alaska that used to compost up there. They had a short growing season, but with the long daytime hours, he ran a hose through his compost pile and actually heated water with it. It wasn't super hot, but he could bathe and shower with it.
That is very interesting. You know, they do that now with the earth couple pumps underneath the ground, but with a compost with the extra heat thing,
Right.
I bet he did get some extra BTUs out of it.
He did.
You know, every town just about it's got some real large, unusual trees. Like this big old oak here. It's sitting in Marion, right near the railroad track. That's what this show's about. Big old trees that's been spared to saw, been took care of, it's still alive. Some of them 200 years old or better. So if you got an old tree, an unusual tree, give us a call. We might come by and talk about it and take a look at it, put it on the show. But you have to admit, this is a beautiful old oak tree here. And it's a big one, really a big one. We're here right outside of Marion with Carol Smith in the town of Vincent. And Carol, won't you tell me about this enormous walnut behind me here?
Well, I don't know much other than the fact that I think it's a very old tree that's been here. The house was built approximately 100 years ago, and we've lived here for about the past 12, 14 years, and so it's just a big tree.
Yes, ma'am, it sure is. And you've got a lot of historic old trees on your property, a couple of big oaks that I treated a few years ago for your brother Lewis. And you're checking on the website, the state website, about whether this is one of the largest in the state, aren't you?
Yes, a state heritage tree, and I understand that we can measure it and send in some information, and it possibly, would be a state heritage tree. I think it's just a really neat looking tree, and the fact that it is so big and that it's withstood a number of ice storms and some a tornado that came through here in 1968, so it's held up pretty well.
It sure has. And for people who don't know, you can go to the state's website and look for the historic trees, and it will list the largest of the particular type of tree that you're seeking to find. And you might not have the largest, but you might have the third largest in the state, which is still important. So, if yours not the largest, that's okay. It could be the third largest in a 2 or 3 years and something happened to that other, and you still have the largest tree. But I'm agreeing with you. I think you're right up there at the top with this one. This is an enormous tree, isn't it?
It is. It's very much so. And the squirrels are always happy with it because it produces lots of walnuts.
Got to keep the squirrels happy.
Yes.
Well, we're going to move around here in your yard and show some of your other pretty trees.
Okay.
Miss Smith, this is a extremely old tree. Why don't you tell me what kind of tree we're looking at?
Well, I believe you call it a panola tree. I have been told, and from different books, it's a Royal Paulina tree, and there's another name to it. That
The Emperor's tree.
Okay, and it has interesting seed pods, and when it blooms in the spring, usually in April, it has purple, tubular looking blooms that are similar to a trumpet vine that have a wonderful fragrance to them. So it's just a neat tree.
It sure is, and it's an enormous one. This is one of the biggest ones I've been around. This is a quite valuable tree for the wood, needless to say, because they make little shoes for ceremonies overseas.
Yes, that's what I understand, that they kind of strip the bark or the wood and make sandals.
Yes, ma'am. Well, this is another in your yard. You've got a half a dozen or better. We'll try to cover a couple more. We'll move around the yard.
Okay.
Miss Smith, your brother Lewis had me treat this tree over a year ago. Could you tell any difference after we treated this tree?
Oh, most definitely. This is a mulberry tree that produces fruit in the spring. And it's a very prolific producer. We gather the berries and have some friends that make jelly, and of course my husband makes wine, and on several occasions we have made wine with these mulberries, and it's a very dry wine, but it's very good. So I'm partial to his winemaking abilities, but we've had other people say that it's real good. So.
And
But after you treated it, it really it produced many more berries than it ever had before.
yes, ma'am. That's that multi-nutrients and vitamins we put in there, and it's a very old mulberry tree too, isn't it? It's big.
Yes, and I of course cannot tell by looking as you could as to the age of this tree, but it of course has been around quite a while, and I don't know of any other mulberry trees in the area.
Yeah, particularly this big, and a lot I go by is this house. The story of this house, it's at least, didn't you say at least 100 years old?
At least 100 years old, supposedly built around 1895.
Yes, ma'am. And the trees they fit the place to the T, the biggest part of them. That's why we're looking at century-old or better trees, a lot of these.
Yes, I think so.
Well, Miss Smith, I certainly want to appreciate you taking a minute walking through your beautiful yard with me. And we'll catch up with Lewis one of these days and talk to him if we can. He's a retired airplane pilot, and so he's taking it easy for a few days. But maybe I'll catch him one of these days.
Hope so.
Carol, this is one of the big oak trees that I treated for Lewis, and it's been a couple of years since I've done that. Could you tell, what kind of difference could you tell on these?
It really has produced many more leaves, apparently, you know, just from looking at it and remembering over the past few years. But it was, I believe it had some galls, and after you treated it, the number of galls seemed to greatly reduce. In other words, they weren't propagating and increasing in numbers like they had in previous years, and the foliage just looks much healthier, and it's just a pretty tree.
Yes, ma'am. That's what I noticed when John and I drove up, that the top is a whole lot thicker, because we could actually see the sky up through there a couple of years ago, and it's thickened up, and I think it's a little stronger tree now.
I think so. We've had a few storms through here the past several months, and with some high winds, and in previous years we would have lots of limb damage in this tree, but recently it seems like it's holding up better.
Yes, ma'am. It makes it a stronger tree when you treat them, and it just pays to take care of these old trees, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, because they don't grow them like this instantaneously anymore, so we hope future generations will enjoy them as we have.
Yeah, I think that was what your brother said when he had me treated, that he wanted to, you know, keep it healthy for the years to come.
Yes, sir. That's exactly right. And that's, you know, we don't own the land. We're just kind of stewards.
That's it. That's a great way to look at it. And I had one person tell me the other day when I looked at his trees, he had lost 4 of these enormous trees on his watch. That was his statement.
Yes.
And he didn't want to lose any more. So, you know, take care of what you got on your watch.
Exactly, you know, and that's what we're trying to do, and you're helping us do that.
Thank you. Glad to help. I'm out here a little ways from Greenway, Arkansas, on the Coomer farm. Glenda and Galen Coomer. And about 7 years ago, they had me treat all these big old oak trees. It had a storm come through and tore them up, and they had a borer problem. We got that straightened out, and then here this year, here about 4 or 5 months ago, they called me back out, and they let the borers get back in them. He had stopped his preventive maintenance program of spraying and stuff, and I treated the trees for him, and I stopped in here on him today, and the trees are looking good, and they had great things to say. In fact, he'd be on the camera with me now, but he's out on the field harvesting. But a tree that's been treated, you can drive down the road and see the difference. It's no problem, because the tree responds well once you see it's got a problem and take care of it. I'm here right outside of Jonesboro with Kenneth Crisp with Superior Lawn Service. And Kenneth, I know you do great work with your lawn service, and you have a great business. Why don't you tell our viewers why you called me in here on these trees?
I called Mr. Ed Dickey in because my trees didn't look good. They were turning yellow, and I had noticed some damage, like right down here at the bottom of them and stuff. And we've been in the lawn spraying business now for 20 years, and we wanted an expert in the tree service, so that's why we called you.
Well, what I appreciate that, Kenneth, but what I showed Kenneth, you could actually see the borer cuttings where the borers had entered the trees, and these trees have been stressed for one reason or another over the last 2 or 3 years. And even up here, you can see where the sap is oozed down. And Kenneth had me treat 4 of these big old oaks. And you say you've been doing lawns for 20 years. You do shrubbery too, don't you, Kenneth?
Yes, sir, we do. We sure do.
I was noticing, if nobody's seen his place, it's right out on 163 between Jonesboro and Harrisburg. I think I'm telling it right. But he's got the coolest pipe fence I've ever seen for his horses. And I was quizzing him before the camera went on, and how did you come up with making that fence?
Bruce Carr and I built this fence. We built it in 2000 is when it was. Sure was.
And you had a bender and stuff that right on site where you just, there's not a bit of concrete on them posts or anything like that?
Not a bit, not a bit. We did everything at the shop and welded it together, and we're very pleased with it.
Oh yeah, because that concrete in itself will rot that steel out, you know. And you've got a horse barn up here, and that's your son Cody, I think the camera shows, sitting on that fence.
That's him up there.
And how old is he?
He's 10. He's 10.
All right. Now, I know you run into because I'll tell you quick, I don't mess with lawns and I don't mess with shrubbery. Trees is all I can handle. And but you have you've got a great place here, and I've seen some of your work in the past on the lawns and stuff. You got your hands full taking care of yards, don't you?
Yes, sir. We stay pretty busy.
Kenneth, here's another one of these oaks, and what was happening with it?
It had a bunch of dead limbs and stuff in it. The leaves had started to fall off, and it had a bad dead spot in it. And that's why I called Ed out here to look at it.
Right, and it's boars have got it in too, and pulled it down, and it's pretty well stressed. And but we got it took care of. We got it treated. Point I'm trying to make is, even when you're in, he is a professional in his own right with his professional weed control and fertilization on lawns and stuff. Sometimes it's just hard to take care of everything, isn't it?
Well, you can get too many irons in the fire and can't take care of what you got. So that's why we called you about that.
Right. Well, you can see from Kenneth's equipment, he's got several of these rigs like this, and his riding partner there is in the truck with him with his head hanging out. I think that's neat, that rides with them all the time. And I want to thank you for taking a minute to talk about your trees, Kenneth.
Appreciate it.
We'll check back here in the future, and we'll see how these react in the spring to what we did.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
You know, we got a lot of parks around this part of the country that's in the states that well, it's just filled with a lot of these old trees that they still take care of. And beautiful to look at and nice to sit under and enjoy. I'm in Rector, Arkansas. Their park is full of a lot of big old historic trees. But if you get a chance, you know, just don't walk by them in a hurry. Take a minute to look at what your forefathers have took care of to let us enjoy. And maybe you'll want to take care of yours so other people can enjoy your trees too. You know, some trees have insect problems. Some just have construction damage. Well, we can handle them both generally at the same time. I'm using a soil injection here, building a mold of chemicals all around the root ball. It gets translocated into the crown of the tree. It has a very long residual. Stays working for a year or better, killing insects as well as growing new feeder roots and increasing the canopy of the tree. 9 different chemicals is going in this at once. So there's so much we can do that we used to couldn't do, and it's in most cases it's cheaper than it used to be. And just name me just any one thing that's come down in price. Well, taking care of your trees have come down in price. Give us a call. You'll be surprised. We're the Tree Doctor, Dickey Tree Service, in your yellow pages under trees.
Thank you for joining us for Tree Doctors today. We've run out of time. You can catch Tree Doctors every Saturday and Sunday at 6 o'clock right here on KAIT. If you need to get in touch with Ed, you can call the number below, or you can get in touch with him at dickeytree.com. Thanks again. We'll see you next time on Tree Doctors.